As we prepare to celebrate exactly 2 years of Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracy, we have big plans.
This is Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracy,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin and Tracy Guy Decker.
In a complex world, change takes courage.
Wholehearted relationships can keep us accountable.
Oh, the world is changing, and I am changing with it. Oh, the world is changing, and we are changing too. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my living room. For those who aren't watching the video, Tracy and I are together recording a live episode in person for the first time for our 103rd episode.
Yay!
Woo!
It really is. This is the first time we've ever recorded while we're in the same space with one microphone.
One mic? Yay! It's so special! What a journey this has been.
For real.
Shout out to Noah who connected us.
Hey, Noah.
Yeah. Hey, Noah. We love you.
So not this week, but next week marks exactly 2 years of Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracy.
It does.
And it's been quite a journey over these 2 years, right? Like, I mean, we actually are not where we started. We're not recording the same way. We're not editing the same way. The structure is not the same. A lot of things have changed over our 2 years together. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been in a consistent, even flow of evolution.
We have. And I'm excited to see where we go next. We have big plans.
We do. That we've come by
energy.
We have big energy and big plans. I do think. They're in April plans mode. They're not in Tracy's. We have a blow by blow, step by step subtasks.
I don't have the milestone
state yet. But we do have like a structure that we came to last week that feels really good,
really good.
About the next iteration of Joyous Justice's work. And honestly, the first full foray into, it feels crazy to say it, my foray of us stepping into my bigger, bolder, original vision for Joyous Justice, which I've spent about the last 3 or so years growing into the leader I've needed to be in order to have my team and I lead the full vision of what Joyous Justice, not the full vision, but beginning to step into the full capacity of what Joyous Justice, the impact or the powerfully positive and healing presence Joyous Justice and all the work we do has the potential to be in this world.
Yeah. So, April, you've been pushing us and yourself to be like bigger and braver, and you wouldn't use this word, but more profound, I think, is the way that I think about it. Like just more fundamental, like the profundity is about actually the simplicity and applicability of some of the analysis and practices and combination of the two that we've been developing. And you've been pushing us to do that for a while, and it's really it's been really gelling for me over the past couple of weeks as I've been applying the principles that we kind of mapped out together for Grounded and Growing, but actually for much, much more, and realizing that I had really been thinking of the SHEMA process that we developed for Grounded and Growing as like helping us to deal with conflict across lines of difference. And things have happened in my life and just like little
it is
things,
great for that.
And in my head and in my heart that we're not about that at all.
Nope.
Mm-hmm. But for which the processes that we and the practices, the whole thing has been so deeply helpful and instructive and helped me move through things that are old and hard and big. And it's been really instructive for me, and also like it's helped me to see more of like exactly the, not exactly, but more of the, helps me to more understand the push
what I've been trying,
that you've been, you know,
what this lady has been rambling on about. Yeah, so well said, Tracy. Yeah. And it feels like this also relates to some of the themes that we've spoken about around the subject of Thanksgiving and me engaging in coming home work, what's called coming home work, around reconnecting with my Indigenous heritage. And this is something that, I was always raised to know that I have Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Cherokee heritage, but it's only been in the last couple of years that I've been able to move through the trauma and racism that was layered onto me as a kid, intergenerational stuff, and then also really actively, even just honestly, in terms of resources that are now available on the internet, even in the last couple of years that were not 5 years ago, reconnecting with Cherokee spirituality and integrating and having these different experiences of noticing more and more that, as people often say in movies or in different profound spaces, like your ancestors are with you. Mm-hmm. You hear this, but then I've been practically experiencing it as concerns and fears that kept me from living into joyous justice. Like, even, in terms of some of the elements of the SHEMA, there were elements of it that are bold and countercultural, but honestly countercultural in the best ways, in the sense that they're really decolonized mm-hmm. and essential and just capital and lower case T truths that are principles that are applicable consistently. And but I had a number of different fears about me, about the work, about different mm-hmm. things, and I've had to work about the team. One of the things that we worked through over the past few months was certain hard conversations that we needed to have as partners. Mm-hmm. And for me, after doing some work, noticing that the concerns I had about talking with you was actually historical, right. unhealed stuff for me that I was bringing into the present moment, right? And we were able to start to move through it. And by me moving through that, I was able to actually bring these issues to you so we could talk about them and figure them out. There's just been a lot of work that's been happening internally within each of us and on our team. Mm-hmm. And speaking to the point about how we created Grounded and Growing and the SHEMA process, to me, it was, I can't quite come up with the words that I want, but we developed it right when we were ready to, right? Yeah. That we sat down and we were like, an acronym would be, like, there's a number of different things I want to teach her. An acronym would be helpful. I think you might have told us about SHEMA, and then we just were like, happened. Yeah, it was like all of the work, and it wasn't like, it was that we'd been watering, I'd been watering seeds, and we'd been watering seeds, and relationally we've been doing things, and that when we asked the right question, it just tumbled out.
There's Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, talks about in one of her books about writing. She has this idea that ideas are out there, almost like independent things, like waiting for the mind that can manifest them. Mm-hmm. And that she tells the story of this one poet who, like, a poem would go through them, and sometimes she'd be out, the poet would be out in the fields or whatever, like, didn't have a pen, and she'd have to run back and catch it, and she'd write it backwards, like the last line all the way up to the first line, because she would catch it by the tail, she said. Anyway, my point was, as we were getting the SHEMA down on paper, it almost felt like it was a thing that already existed.
It was just waiting for us
describing it. We had just, we were the artist, the poet, who finally, like, gave manifest this idea that existed independent of us. It was so cohesive immediately, which of course it wasn't immediate, because, as you say, we've been watering the seeds you've been watering for a really long time, and then we together have been working on it also. But it was, it was one of those things where it just felt right. It's like when I'm making challah and the dough is finally the right consistency, like, I don't know how to tell somebody else how to get it there, how long to knead or whatever. I just know when it feels right. Mm-hmm. And that's mm-hmm. what it was like for me.
And for me, it felt really great, especially because as I was doing it, it also was the ants that, like, it's also spoke to this core spiritual principle of the energy of the solution and the energy of the problem are really different. And as it tumbled out, I noticed the ways in which it just either eradicated or circumvented the fears that I had about things. Like one of the challenges I had is that it summarized the system that I'd spent years cultivating around like being in meditation spaces and noticing how they were like, just sit with your feelings. But as someone who has 3 different family lines of immense trauma and also in my own early life, like I heard the principle of what was being taught. And I also noticed I need more help around this terror in my body. Right. And yet this still feels true, but I need more here and noticing with my multiracial identity and multifaceted interests of like, how do I get all these things to fit? And then as I can't remember if I mentioned this on this podcast or not, I may or may not have, but I've definitely said it to you around February or January of this year. I was like changing or putting on pants or something. I was in my bedroom doing something about putting on clothes. And it was almost like I heard the like links lock into place. This is one of April's, interesting metaphysical moments that I'm sharing if you didn't already know. And I just had this, like, I got a message almost from the divine being like, the system is complete. like you have taken enough time.
Achievement unlocked.
Yeah. Like click, like your counter oppression and the healing and the spiritual, which, I'm less wanting to call it woo and more wanting to call it like my Afro-Indigenous spirituality, right? And it's not even just that, because it's also, I'm learning these things from a Jewish vantage point within Kohenet, but more of just these decolonized spiritual principles that are stretched for some, but honestly, a lot of them are kind of table talk. Is it table talk or tabletop? Countertop, wisdom, kitchen table logic. That's it. This is a classic. April brain thing. Yeah, like just kitchen table logic, like Sixth Sense. Like this is something that all of us have. We can engage it or not, but like how else do you explain that when someone's looking at you at a party? You don't have eyes in the back of your head. Most of us know that feeling when we know somebody's staring at us and we look at them and they're staring at us. Yeah. These are right, and these are things that outside of a colonial capitalist oppressive system are things that many indigenous cultures just incorporated, and it was the norm, right? And so I had a lot of fear about these different things. For a few months this year, I was really stuck in the, I want to be open about these things, but I don't want to be framed. I don't want my brand to shift to one of, say, like Miss Cleo, right? Right. That,
to the stars.
Right. Or like someone who is fully like, I still have all of my professional expertise and knowledge, and I bring that strategy and woven and integrated throughout that. Like, it kind of feels like parts of my identity, right? That, I don't want to be seen as solely of any one of my heritages. I am the presence of all of those things interwoven mindfully. And so with the SHEMA process, and it, as you said, it like brought together a number of different things. And to me, it was also an answer to prayers I had about how do I account for these different things? And that's what I was starting to say is one of the pieces was I've spent years cultivating this knowledge, and it's like a library of insight and different connections. And how do I convey this in a way that's not completely overwhelming to someone? SHEMA, this relatively simple acronym that contains multitudes, but in layers and ways that are accessible, that can guide people through a journey so that they don't, if they want to, they can, but they don't have to embark on a 20-year journey like I did of reading hundreds of books and being in multiple spaces and lovingly and painstakingly figuring out, okay, this isn't helpful, but this piece from this space is, and cuts out all of that. And it's just this elegant, yet nuanced and adaptable journey.
I think part of the profundity of it too is that ultimately, in my interpretation of it, what we're doing with SHEMA is inviting its participants to be fully human, to be whole, without judging the different bits. That's what the core is. And so
or challenge points or where there are a lack of, and another way of saying what you're saying is like, to me, it's the perfect embodiment of what we really strive for in with the Joyous Justice of compassion and rigor, and figuring out the dynamic, healthy vibrance of both of them, of having rigorous analysis and also coming from a place of love and restorative justice with ourselves and other people.
Which is not what we've been taught around rigor, right? Like,
Not at all.
We have been taught to completely dissociate everything, right? I mean, that's part of the problem with Western medicine
and colonial oppressive systems.
Academia is part of the, I mean, it's like, so we like
steeped, right, in our institutions.
I am fond of saying that, like, we're working parents in general, but especially mothers, are expected to parent as if they have no job and work as if they have no kids. Like all of the things. So, and I was definitely taught that, like, spiritual, whatever your definition of spiritual is, like thinking about things bigger than ourselves, is a thing that you do in designated spaces and times, right? And like the dissociation of mind, body, spirit, everything, as if my brain is not connected to my gut, and vice versa. And SHEMA fundamentally is inviting us to reintegrate. The profundity is bigger than I had initially envisioned it, right? Like, as I said, I was seeing how this thing would work for Jews who are working for social justice across lines of difference. It's so much bigger.
Mm-hmm. And it aligns with my vision for Joyous Justice. And when we created it, we created it under the context of me saying emphatically that I wanted us to expand, right? Which all of this is building towards, y'all, bringing you into some of our conversation and the transformation that we're in the midst of now. It's been a few months now that I've been wanting to continue our process of shifting and evolving the podcast to acknowledge everything that we've just spoken about, the expansive and multidimensional of nature of the conversations we have, and we tailor it to our beloved, amazing Jewish community. But honestly, a lot of the principles we're speaking about have a lot of universal or much broader reaching relevance and medicine and implications for people from a variety of backgrounds who align more fundamentally around our core principles, regardless, or in part because of their specific spiritual persuasion or lack thereof. And so I thought, we're grappling with these different things, and we have you, beloved listener, who you may have recently joined, but a lot of our listeners are longtime listeners and have been on this journey with us. So in some ways, I feel like this might be like other times with you or other people where, at least in my experience, I don't know about for you, where we're sharing this thing and some of you might even be thinking like, I saw this. Yeah. Like I saw this coming, or I've been kind of wondering this. So we still think we have something here. Oh yeah. It's really special.
The podcast isn't going away. That's not
It's not going anywhere. But we've kind of outgrown the original frame of Jews Talk Racial Justice.
The name.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah. Specifically the framing and the name of the podcast. And I've really been working in my path on this over the past few years, especially with the help of the learning and training I'm getting in the context of Kohenet, and honestly just the safe and supportive frame that Kohenet has provided for me, not only to work on my feminine and feminist earth-based spirituality, but also to weave in my Afro-Indigenous spirituality and heritage more boldly and vividly. And through doing that, finding that instead of it being more fractured, it actually truly did make me more whole. And actually so many of these things overlap in really potent ways. And getting myself ready to live into the big, bold vision I have for Joyous Justice, which is to provide this really deep, clear, and loving intervention and suite of resources in the world that says, to what you were saying earlier, that actually it's a false choice. There's nuance and skill involved, but we don't actually have to choose our joy and well-being versus advancing justice in the world. Actually, these things are inextricably linked, and we will actually only truly be able to access joy as we are working toward and embodying justice. And who wants justice if it's not joyful and in alignment with our well-being, and that these things are deeply intertwined and honestly part of the work that I've been doing over these few years is it's not that simple. Because if it were actually that simple, this dichotomy, wouldn't exist. Right. So I've taken time over the years to really go through and parse out what is helpful in these different spaces. What are different resources that are out there? Like, ooh, that has white supremacy, but this principle is really helpful. How do I pull these different things? And what we've been saying is it all culminated in this framework that also perfectly aligns with my broader vision for Joyous Justice, which is that I wanted Joyous Justice to be a resource for a range of different people. One of the part of that bigger vision for me has always been that for a long time, and still always for me, if you've ever been to a talk I've done, you might have heard me say this, and you probably heard me say it on this episode, that part of why, that it wasn't a default and it wasn't from a place of fear, but I have strategically chosen over the past 20 years, increasingly so, especially in the last 15, to focus my social change and loving interventions and work within the Jewish community, because I love our community and I believe that Jews have a distinctly special role to play in helping advance us toward a world of greater wholeness, justice, liberation, and joy. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed in the past year that I've grown so much that I want to work with a range of different people, but still keep that core, because at Joyous Justice's root, it's based in my spirituality and values that are heavily influenced by Judaism. And so I want us to have a company and organization that ideally especially feels wonderful for our beloved fellow Jews. And I want that to be true as we iterate and evolve the podcast. We want to continue to engage y'all and hopefully have even more fun together as we move forward. And also more broadly for our work with Joyous Justice, we may offer things for people of different or no spiritual or faith backgrounds, but at its core, it will still be guided by not exclusively, but a number of core Jewish principles, and be open about that, because that's a part of the work that I want to do in the world too, is that I'm mostly focused inward on strengthening and empowering our people and helping us heal. But also too, I think Judaism is really beautiful, and I don't want to force it on people, but I'm also not going to hide the fact that the services and offerings that we provide are deeply Jewishly inspired. And that's actually exciting to me.
Well, because showing up in our wholeness is part of the point. And you and I both show up, at least in part as Jews. And so that's
awesome, Jews.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm thinking of, this is not a Jewish metaphor, but I'm really thinking about, the end of the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, when his heart grows and the frame breaks.
I don't remember the scene.
Oh.
Whenever I hear about the Grinch, he kind of looks like one of my family members. So that's always what I think about.
Well, at the very end, the Grinch realizes the true meaning of Christmas is not about the presents. It's about the relationships. And his heart grows, and you zoom in and you see his little shriveled heart, and it just grows, and it has a frame around it, and the frame breaks. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about, is that metaphor of we're outgrowing the frame of the name of this podcast. So I think we want to think about a new name. Mm-hmm. And we one of the things one of the ways I've been thinking about it is that for the folks for whom what we talk about and our conversations resonate, I thought it was because we're all Jewish. Uh-huh. But I'm realizing that
and I'm not even sure if we all are.
Right.
I think we have a number of Jewish adjacent folks who also tune in.
But I thought it was something in the Jewishness that was a key to the resonance. And now I'm realizing that I don't think that's actually what the resonance is. Mm-hmm. I think it's actually more about, the wholeheartedness and the compassion and the
nature of our relationship,
the relationship and the desires for the world and for ourselves and for each other, which fits nicely in a particular Jewish lens, but is not necessarily Jewish.
Exclusively, right. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's what I would love to see us sort of find that new frame that doesn't frame out the Jewishness, but also is big enough for the folks for whom that other stuff is central, that they can,
and who want
can feel a sense of belonging with us.
Right. And we talked about this before as we were thinking about what we might say. I think it's important to say here that part of this is theoretical and around my dream. And part of this in the last year, especially, has become pragmatic, where there have been a range of people, followers and people in my network who aren't Jewish and who are not Jewish adjacent, who love our content and who've wanted to engage
and have felt like they didn't belong or that it wasn't for them.
Right. And in part because it wasn't designed to, a lot of the core content could be helpful for them, but we did frame it for our beloved Jews. And so it's not just that alone. To me, it's that and the combination of what I wanted to mention too on this episode of earlier this year this year was not for the faint of heart.
Right.
It's, there's been a lot of cheshbon hanefesh and just a lot of deep reflection and interrogation of different things of a lot. And now I'm feeling some of that. I've gotten through it. I'm transformed. It's all good. But in addition to having folks come to us who we had to turn away or say, you can participate, but know that it's really framed just for this group, is also me beginning to hit a bit of a wall in terms of a creative wall around the ways that I've evolved, that I think in time the Jewish community will grow into, and what I can provide to the community and what the community more broadly is ready to receive at this point in time. And I had this question, and it ended up being like a multi-week journey, but for the first time in a long time, I asked myself around March or so of this year, after some different things happened related to Whoopi Goldberg and different reactions and different intercultural moments happening, and me noticing, I know I have, through a range of different things, some of which we teach, a lot of which we teach in the context of the SHEMA process right now within Grounded and Growing, but we're looking at expanding our application and teaching of it. But I was I'm going through this constant cycle, and I know how to do this, of experiencing pain and hurt from my fellow community members and going on a healing journey. But I just keep getting hurt. And what I realized several weeks into it, actually through teaching Grounded and Growing and having a friction point with when one of our wonderful students asked a question, I wasn't fully ready to answer it in the ways that I wanted. And as I debriefed and reflected about it later, I realized she asked me something that I wasn't fully prepared to teach. And I haven't had that in years. Right. And I was yes, this, not only did this just come to us and felt really amazing, but in some ways it was so amazing that it was kind of easy to overlook. We didn't even fully see the profundity
we didn't.
of what came through. But as I was going through that, and it helped me realize that insight that I had earlier, that the thing that I was missing is that I'm not growing anymore. Before I was growing, and so it was worth it. Because I also thought, as I was thinking through that, but if I just leave, I'm past the point, and I wonder if other folks have thought about this and where you are with it, but for a number of Jewish leaders of color, at times there's a question of, is all of this sorrows and difficulty at times that we experience worth it? And should we stay? And some people opt not to stay. And I realized as I was considering this spring that I'm past that point, that this is my community, that I am Jewish, that I'm not going anywhere. But the ways in which I engage and how, that is up for debate and discussion. But I love my people, I'm in it, and also this is my people. So there's a way in which it's both I love the broader community, I love this tradition, and also nothing is going to let this be stripped from me.
Right.
But I realized that but that insight from our Grounded and Growing class and coming back the next class and noticing this thing and loving that. I don't want that to be all the time, but 20 to 30% of the time with the work I'm doing, I also want to be in a state of active evolution. I not only want to bring expertise to students, but I also want to be evolving. And as we're thinking about the next iteration of our work, it feels perfect because rooted in our relationship and each of our bodies of rigorous, courageous work in aligned and in different ways that complement each other really well, we are well equipped to hold the space. And it is so expansive and profound that it's something that we can both be delivering and helping to facilitate insight and knowledge and transformation for our participants as we continue to engage in a dynamic process of evolution. And that's where I want to be in this work. And that's where I want most people, if they so choose, that's where I think it's best, if it resonates. I'm not saying it has to be this way, for people to be in a space where you are able to play to your strengths and you get to get better and better as you go. And so that was the insight that also came through with this. I'm not sure if that landed where I wanted it to land, where my brain was going, but I think that was still helpful for people to know. So where do you think we should go next, Tracy?
Well, should we talk about some of the names we've been considering?
Yes. So I actually think you ultimately suggested one that I've been toying with and sitting with for a while. But before we get to that one, I think it seems like that's potentially the obvious choice. And again, we would love, if anything we're saying, both it seems like the main point or a side point, if it's resonating with you, we would love for you to be, if you want to be, in dialogue with us and contact us and share your thoughts about this, because we want to engage in this transition in partnership with y'all. And which is why I propose that we just talk about this on the podcast and just be somewhat transparent. And I also thought, and I already feel like it is helping for us by talking about it in this way. It's also helping us just before we even heard from y'all, which we also would love to do. So some of the names, so there's the Grounded and Growing podcast name, the current banner, which we're thinking might potentially be the name of a membership model we may launch, the banner on our website that I just made as a banner, but then a business coach I was speaking earlier this year was like, this is an amazing brand. You should leverage this. So the banner for our suite of offerings is Leadership for Liberation Laboratory. But that feels a little long for a podcast.
Yeah. And the laboratory doesn't feel quite right to me because
for a podcast.
For the podcast.
Yeah.
Because that's mostly just us talking. Though we might bring guests on, but it's not the same sort of experimentation for
that
y'all.
Would happen in the context of a membership or interactive sessions.
Yeah. So, but even Leadership for Liberation, maybe. We also talked about, Grounded and Growing. Though I feel like that would need a subhead so that people don't think that we're a gardening
horticultural professionals.
Yeah, and Watering the Seeds has similar concerns.
Oh, you mentioned one the other day.
Yeah, I had an idea of dancing before liberation, which is like the metaphor of dancing, and I want that in the I want to, and maybe that's not the right word because I do not want to be ableist, but that sort of idea of graceful movements, and then
graceful
and joyful, and also before that, I'm intentionally trying to allude to when King David danced before the ark, danced before the Lord is the way the English translation often is, and it was so ecstatic and undecorous that Saul's daughter Michal saw him and hated it because she was more Western and sort of like
judgy,
decorous that we needed to be, Anyway, so that idea of like dancing before liberation, both before in time, but also to usher it in, but also sort of in celebration of. So there was something about that kind of felt poetic and good and like Jewish without being exclusively so.
Yeah, and also having implications for relevance for other, like at least for Christians too, which one of my subgroups that I think our work actually lends itself to, but not exclusively, is other aligned spiritual progressives, from spiritual progressives and radicals, people who are rooted in their spirituality and leverage it in the context of advancing justice and collective liberation. And then there's the one that like I've been sitting with for quite some time, but it just felt too big and I wasn't fully ready. But then right before we started recording, you said it, and it struck. And hearing my trusted and beloved partner say it added a piece that was missing before. So can you listener, can you guess what it might be? You probably already did. You probably already are like, why are they not mentioning
Joyous Justice? I think
the Joyous Justice Podcast.
The Joyous Justice Podcast. I was telling April that I think that some of you may be listening. You're like, wait, that's not what it's called. Yeah, no, that is not what it's called.
Because you mentioned that somebody had called it that before, and I think I also have had some folks who are regular listeners, like they just think of it as the Joyous Justice Podcast.
Yeah.
because it is in all practice, it is the podcast that Joyous Justice, right? And so I'd been feeling like kind of back to some of my lingering, and a mystic with whom I worked, Jo Kent Katz, recently said to me, and this is probably one of the things that she was like, things are feeling a little, because I was telling her a few weeks ago that things were just feeling like slightly wonky, where I felt that at times in my spiritual journey, where it almost feels like it's like a shadow, like of something that's moved, but there's still just like a little lingering energy. And she mentioned that what was coming through from spirit is that I've done a lot of work to move fear, but there were a few remaining pieces. And I'm seeing that pragmatically, this is one of those pieces. So when you said it though, it was like, yeah, that's it. Like, and also, you know, because I was thinking, oh, it's so big. And I was doing the April classic thing. I'm sure a number of you can relate, where like in my mind, it's the most, which it may actually be at some point, but it's okay if that takes months or years for that to come to be. I'm in an active state of ongoing evolution. And since I last considered it on Thursday or Friday, we've had conversations, which we might talk a little bit about in our next episode, about where we're thinking of going for Joyous Justice, right, and the suite of offerings and who we want to be offering them to and how. And yeah, so all of that to say, it feels a little scary, but it feels like the right amount of scary, where it feels fine and that we can just live into it. And it's kind of what we've always been.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it's signaling a change. It's just signaling where we've been growing into anyway. And my, the heart frame metaphor from the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, it's like the frame, it's big enough that we can continue to grow without outgrowing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is true and fits. So it feels like the right frame to me.
Yeah. We've taken some time to share some of the active evolution that we've engaged in. And though also my sense is that lots of people that you perhaps over the past couple years in similar and perhaps totally different ways have been engaging in a lot of change around all the shifts that the pandemic induced, around all the things it brought to light about different met and unmet needs in our lives. And so as we're thinking about shifting into this, we want to touch base with our people, mm-hmm, and send an email out, right, just to connect with folks, to share a little bit, and also say our sense is, I'm feeling it, and also we're hearing from different conversations here and there, the stuff that is coming up for people, and invite you through just a few questions to share some of what's on your mind and heart, like what's coming up for you, and for us to take a week or two to synthesize some of what we're hearing, and then to have a community conversation where we share back out what is active in the Joyous Justice community, what's coming up for folks, perhaps using some of the modalities we use in our various programs and facilitation to help hold space, to have listening partnerships, do some group work, and just deeply contradict the isolation, and to help us all see collectively where are there shared themes, where are there distinctions, and get a sense of this that I think could just be really helpful after however the Shemitah year has been for you. It's been incredibly introspective and also challenging in a number of ways for our team, in very generative ways, and ways in the moment that we were like, hopefully this is generative. But right, as y'all know, I believe in, as we in part teach among a number of different things through the SHEMA process, if we choose for it to be all shit is fuel and fertilizer. And that was very much the case during this Shemitah year. But we're coming up on a new year, and Elul is approaching, and this process may overlap a bit with Elul, and it just feels really perfect. I think it's just a perfect Joyous Justice practice in the spirit of community and the collective, and valuing both our individual journeys and also the ways we're interconnected, to engage in a collective, reflective conversation about what's coming up for us individually and what are we seeing collectively that can help, I think, provide us some comfort and insight and support as we navigate through Elul and the sacred month of Tishrei. And it feels aligned with this process too. So all of that to say, we're in a state of transition, and we have increasing clarity, and there's also, it's slightly amorphous, and we're in community. So please feel free to reach out to us however you'd like, whether it's on social media or through our email or website.
And watch for this request for, sort of where you're feeling. It won't be a lot of questions.
No.
3 to 5 questions for you to sort of surface where you are, what you're feeling, and that'll help us all counter isolation, and also for us to help figure out the right way to support our broader community.
And I think it'll be a good warm up that's in the spirit of what we teach in Joyous Justice for a Lul and for the Cheshbon HaNefesh process before doing the deeper introspection. Like, just how are you feeling? What do you want? What are your desires? What has been going well? What's been tough? Just to name those different things, because ideally when we're doing the deeper, more rigorous work around Teshuvah, it's helpful to have that broader context of what actually is going on in our world. Yeah.
So just quickly, Cheshbon HaNefesh, accounting of the soul, it's sort of an introspection that we're invited to do during Elul and Tishrei.
Yeah, and a lot's happened. So I think adding this additional opportunity will just provide more fertilizer for that process and for us to feel less alone. I think even if what comes back is different, that is just to me different than what I am feeling, although I suspect there will be some overlap.
Yeah.
But even if there isn't, I still find it anchoring to know, to one, feel held by the trust that our community was willing to give us in sharing their reflections, and also just knowing where my people are.
I think for me too, like hearing people's stories and about where they are and what they're feeling when it's true for them, even if it doesn't resonate for me, knowing that they are having feelings helps me to counter that dissociation that I was talking about before.
And here's the thing, Tracy, this answers a question that you asked me during our team meeting about some of my intention and strategy around doing this and what
around the survey specifically.
Yeah, and also specifically about how I'm feeling about shifting and expanding and growing in different ways. And as we're talking, it's crystallizing it for me. So I'll just, without giving all the context, bring y'all in, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along, is that I am no longer, what before felt just like simply a commitment and a love and being held, has started, given my expansion and growth, to feel like a limitation for me in terms of what Joyous Justice and what I as a leader am meant to provide and the people I am meant to reach. And to me, I think it feels especially important to engage in this process collectively, because Jews are still one of my core peoples. And because I am expanding out and no longer limiting my work to that, I also want to be weaving that in centrally into what we do as we open our programming and or offer new programming or iterations of programming that enable more people to benefit from what we have the capacity to beautifully and ethically and effectively facilitate. In some ways, it feels like we're just so ready to do it. And through talking through it with you now, it feels like I'm ready for it. I'm just feeling deep appreciation for our listeners and for supporting us and for writing reviews on iTunes for, I don't even know where we are now. I would guess we're pushing 25,000 downloads. And we have hundreds of regular listeners each week. And I just so appreciate your interest and commitment and the ways that y'all have showed up to our different programs and applied what we teach in your life to help yourself and others. And I hope that this share today and talking about these different things, that in different and various ways, that it either was deeply comforting, that either you were like, maybe you were like, finally, like I've been waiting for them to say this, or perhaps it's like, I've actually been thinking about different things, but you could connect to the different themes and found inspiration for parts of your living where you're like, either I am like where it gives you permission to notice where you are being brave in ways that you haven't noticed, or like maybe helps you start a little bit of a journey around us naming what has been true to us and fully living into our capacity to move forward with it. So either way, all of that to say, I'm feeling intuitively like I think what we've shared will resonate, and likely in a variety of different ways. And hopefully, just to be explicit, it also achieved or advanced our specific intention to lean into our relationship with you. And even though, I don't know, Tracy, I'll let you speak for yourself, but for me, part of my conditioning as a Black woman is to and I've already contradicted this in various ways, but this is still just another step in that direction, the desire is to always be polished and totally ready to go, even though I've learned that is actually oppressive and not helpful, especially as an entrepreneur and someone who needs to iterate. And so this was just me from my angle, stepping into that a bit more and giving you a chance to join us in this process instead of functioning from a place of fear and attempted perfection, which actually honestly just leads to distance a lot. So as we do it more, I'm sure I will be more graceful with it or whatever, but I hope that it still landed. Anything that you want to say to that end, Tracy? Or otherwise?
Ditto to everything April just said, I guess.
Cool.
And just reiterate, like, I love hearing from y'all. Like, anytime you want to reach out, the contact form, if you know me personally, you know how to get me on our social media, whatever. Like, even if you're just like, oh, that one line that April said, like, is sticking with me. I love hearing that stuff. I really do. And it's not, and no, I'm getting anxious that it sounds like I'm being vain or something. That's not
You're
what
not,
I mean.
though, so I wouldn't worry, because
It's more
you're
like,
not a vain person
I
at all.
love feeling like, I mean, we do this because we love it and it resonates for us. And so knowing that it's also resonating for other people just gives it an added level of,
which is also why I'm doing with it, because I can just have you to meet myself and not
we don't need to record.
share it. Yeah. I'm doing it also because I think hopefully this is medicine and or inspiration and or comfort and any number of seed watering for y'all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also because that's partially a thing for you. And I feel like it gives us an excuse as people who care about advancing the world for us to spend more time together and have fun while also supporting folks.
But we don't have that like, unlike when we teach, like, I can't see your face, right? Like, when we're teaching, I always keep my students in gallery. Yes. Always. So
Me
that
too.
I can see all of you.
Yes.
Because I want to, like, I mean, April describes it as like feeling your energy. For me, I just kind of like visually see, like, are you with me or not? I can't see that like this, right? Like, I'm looking at the screen right now and I see me in April.
Yeah.
And so having you like reflect that back, however that comes, I love it. More of it, please. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. And also if you're like hearing all of this and feel inspired and like, I'm busy, don't worry, it's fine.
Right.
Like, we get that too. But we want you to know, because I think a number, especially of our people, because this is a message that Jews get, especially that women get, that a bunch of people get, that you're too much, and don't worry about that with us.
Or that, like, you're bothering us somehow.
Right.
It's no bother. It's not a burden. We are not too busy to hear from you.
Yeah. It brightens our day. And speaking of which, we heard from, a few different people, and 3 people in particular. It didn't make sense to cover in this episode, but we just wanted to let you know that it was really inspiring. We had different thoughts about the episode itself, but like, a few different people wrote us essays, or the framework for essays.
Like, a lot of thoughts
around.
Awesome.
It was amazing about their analysis, where they see this play out, the implications, both specifically what we spoke about and how they see it playing out on social media, in movement spaces, in different cities,
from
case study, the city council, to also
Christian hegemony.
Yeah, the parallels to it around
Christian nationalism.
Thinking about how it strengthens analysis around Christian hegemony and Christian nationalism. So yeah, and so that for us was just like, oh, this is great. And we'll talk about it more in a future episode, but also too, I think there are ways, and we'll reach out to those individuals specifically and ask them if they want to be anonymous or not. But there were specific things that folks shared in the context of some of what we're thinking for future iterations of our work, where we can weave that in. And all of that to say, that's what I want for Joyous Justice, for Tracy's and my partnership on this podcast, for our team's partnership, we'll loop in Sarah, shout out to Sarah Freed. Hey, Sarah, that as we're doing this, all of this is for the purpose of advancing collective liberation with joy through the pathways of joy and love. And we want to be weaving together with you. And so whether or not you explicitly reach out in this or a future episode, or you just look for the different opportunities that we offer for you to be weaving with us, we're here for you. We're excited to be in relationship. And thank you so much for supporting us, sharing our podcast, helping us grow to where we are. And Tracy and I are very eager within the next few weeks and episodes, as we're so ready and as we hear back from you and get more insight, to continue to evolve and grow together with you. And we're excited for what's ahead.
Thanks for tuning in. Our show's theme music was composed by Elliot Hammer. You can find this track and other beats on Instagram at Elliot Hammer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. To join the conversation, visit JewsTalkRacialJustice.com, where you can send us a question or suggestion, access our show notes, and learn more about our team. Take care until next time, and stay humble and keep going.